Well, welcome to the Unmasked Relationship Factor Series. I am AliNICOLE WOW, also known as Majesty, and most of you also know me for being in my masked Majesty role. And been doing this series on unmasking several different dynamics within relationships. And today I am joined by my senior star King Celebrity-preneur Protégé, Tom, who is also one of my relationship empowerment coaches. And we're just going to have some honest discussion. As most of you know, if you've been following this particular series, I don't have a planned agenda. It's just when I press record and whatever I feel guided to speak about during that time, that's pretty much how those segments go. But I will share just a little bit in terms of the importance of this series is to focus on a few areas that aren't commonly talked about, and then some that are, to be able to shine the light on them and maybe bring some resolution through empowering people to really find the answers for themselves versus just trying to listen to a bunch of different experts and gurus. So let me bring Tom. I know he's here with me. Want to welcome you to this space. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you are most welcome. I'm excited about this because we know that relationship dynamics, they vary. A lot of times when people think about relationships, they think mostly or mainly as it relates to couples and dating and marriage. And we do focus a lot on that. And really that is what this series is primarily about. But we also know that the relationship dynamics are family, friends, colleagues, so there are a variety of topics that we can talk about around those areas, as well. But before we start really digging in, something that I do eventually want to talk about, maybe we won't talk about it right away, is the subject, especially for men, that there are a lot of men who are in relationships that are really struggling and suffering and suffocating in silence. And so that definitely is something I want to talk about at some point during this conversation. So before we maybe jump into talking a little bit about that, is there anything that you feel should be unmasked as it relates to relationship dynamics? Anything that you want to to bring up before we start talking about a few other things?
No, nothing in particular. I'll just follow your lead and
Okay.
see where to take us.
Okay, great. I love the raw, organic, in the moment, type of experiences. I believe that those produce really the best outcomes, for sure. So it may be kind of heavy to start talking about the particular subject that I mentioned, but I guess we could, go on in, with that. So one of the reasons why I talk a lot about the male dynamics, a lot more even versus the female dynamics, is because sometimes there's a bias in terms of thinking that females are the ones who are always primarily going through different things within relationship dynamics and toxicity and all those different things. And of course, I cover that. And within my relationship counseling and coaching work, I do, cover those areas for both the males, and the females. But there's a lot of the unseen dynamics, things that are not really talked about in terms of men who are in also toxic, abusive types of relationships, but also ones who are really suffocating. And I know a lot of women are suffocating, but there's been a lot of the light being shined on those areas for so long that it is time that there are some conversations that take place about what men actually are struggling with too, within relationships. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just listening.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. So when we talk about men who are suffocating and really struggling to not have their voices heard, so to speak, but almost feel very disempowered. And there's nothing worse than for a man to feel disempowered about the relationship dynamics. And especially when, of course, within society, has this image that men are supposed to be a certain way and more in the dominant, type of expression. And men who are feeling disempowered aren't men who are punks or men who are henpecked. There are men who are suffering and struggling who are very strong, believe it or not, alpha males. But there are areas, like any and everyone has their own weaknesses or their own places where they're not as evolved. But what happens is that sometimes people have allowed themselves to be conditioned, men primarily, to deal with situations that they actually don't, have to deal with. So when that takes place, then there's a lot of things that aren't being talked about, that even men aren't talking about, even to their own homeboys or close related friends. And they just keep it all balled up and go from day to day. But literally inside, yeah, it's really killing them, and not even softly. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit, talk a little bit about that, because you would agree that that's happening a lot, but not a lot being addressed as it relates to that particular topic.
Oh yeah, men catch hell too in relationships,
Mhm.
and it's not talked about because we expected to just deal with it.
Mhm.
Just take it and keep on pushing.
Right. And as you know, that's not the most healthiest thing. And
Mm-mm.
no, it's not. And what's interesting is that even when men try to actually talk not, I don't even say stand up for themselves per se, but they do try to vocalize their feelings around different things. You do have certain types of females who are not trying to hear that. They're either bringing something up from the person's past, or even if there isn't any past dynamics, there are just, they're not trying to hear that. Especially we're talking about women who are very controlling. And I'm not just talking about narcissistic type of women, highly self-absorbed type of women, but just women who feel the need to be powerful in a sense, and not necessarily trying to be both the man and the woman, even though you do have that. As I say, there's so many layers around this particular topic, but I do know that there are times where men have actually tried to vocalize what they feel, only to have that be disregarded, to be minimized. I can't get my words together. Minimized in a sense. Would you agree that a lot of that takes place?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Uh-oh. Been there, done that. Yeah. A lot of men can definitely say that they have the t-shirt for that. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
Well,
chain,
how about this? I had the blood pressure to prove it.
Wow.
How about a 180 over 130 blood pressure at 26 years old?
Wow. And Tom Tom's not 26, even though he looks 26. He looks younger than 26. He's timeless. Honestly, they were probably shocked if they knew your age.
And I don't have no problem telling them my age either.
Yeah, he's still a baby though. No, I'm just kidding. No,
far from.
no. You're well mature. in years, especially enough to be talking about this topic. And for you to actually bring up that from age 26, a young, young age, before 30,
Yeah,
already
yeah,
having dealt with things, of this nature, of this magnitude. And man, it's really interesting because throughout the years, things that I have witnessed and remember with the type of work that I do, especially it's, private work, but being able to use examples of some of the areas, different topics that I'm very much aware of and what is seen behind the scene, the unseen, the untalked about is that, yes, a lot of men who are going through and exactly what you were mentioning, health related challenges based on stress, not being able to get their own voices out or to talk without being shut down, and really just suffocating, just smothered,
woo,
and feel like they're trapped in someone else's reality that they can't break out of. And again, not talking about men who are not strong, we're not talking about men who don't have backbones. So it's
right. Everybody has their weak moments.
mhm. Right. Go ahead. Speak a little bit more to that. I feel something queuing up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say everybody has a point of weakness. And in some cases, I have no problem in admitting
Mhm.
that sometimes that certain situations might make intelligent people do dumb things,
True.
out of desperation.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
And yeah, and that I've been there too.
Yeah.
And like I said, that high blood pressure that I had, I could have had a stroke from that.
Wow.
So
That's real. That's serious. And a stroke from that,
yeah,
based on something that you would say it's not worth it to be in
right.
scenarios like that. But it's not
And
easy to
it's
shake
unheard
down.
of.
Mhm.
And it's unheard of for somebody that young, 26 to have a stroke.
Yeah, that is not common. That is
No.
that is not common at all. And but different dynamics that take place um, can cause those things in
Yeah.
young and old, because
Yeah.
remember, toxicity is toxicity and it doesn't have any age. Well, we discriminate against this particular age bracket. No, it is what it is. And whoever finds themselves in those scenarios, then are dealing with what comes with the toxicity. But again, a lot of men, they it's happening, but people don't know about it. They're not talking about it with other people. They're doing whatever they can do to either preserve the relationship, or sometimes, as we know, the relationships of convenience that take place. People, financially, different things like that. Because some may be thinking, well, why won't a person just leave? Why won't they, or a man, especially, why won't a man just shift and just leave? Relationships of that magnitude. And that's a whole nother conversation around
Ooh, yeah.
around why men stay. And some of it is, religious conditioning, cultural bias, um, things passed down, expectations.
Antiquated beliefs.
Yeah, right. So talk a little bit about that. I was going to also say the financial aspect, but speak a little bit about that.
All right. You got, some people, especially the old heads, that believe, like marriage, it's an institution that God put together, and
Mhm.
you made a vow and commitment to God to love your wife, like you would love him, and that the marriage vows, the marriage covenant is irrevocable. So they just make it sound like no, even if you're rushed into a marriage or you get in over your head, no matter how uh, no matter how tough it is, or how you got there in the first place, you stuck. You can't get out of it. You just gonna have to deal with it, even if it'll send you to an early grave.
Yeah, that is just a faulty premise. And as someone, as you know, who is an ordained minister, and also does marriage counseling and also has the ability to marry other people, I don't subscribe, to that. I believe that there are
I used to believe
exceptions,
that.
if you want to say exceptions to the rule, so to speak, that it is not stay by any means necessary at all costs. And sometimes they'll treat that as that's the one thing like God won't forgive you for, or something like that. And that's a whole nother conversation. We probably need to come back and do a segment.
I think we need to,
Yes.
especially since they say if you divorce somebody else and remarry, you committing adultery.
Right. That's a whole nother topic. And we definitely need to come back and do something around that for sure. Something I want to bring up, because I'm so glad that you've touched on all of this, because there are the men especially, who would, or others who would say, well, what about men who aren't married? Okay, so why are they staying in those relationships? Because they aren't bound, in a sense. They're not bound to that relationship at this point. Why do even men who aren't married, why do they stay in toxic relationships? Or why do they allow themselves to suffer and to suffocate, to be smothered by?
Well, I'll give you my reason for doing it.
Okay.
I was young and dumb. Okay. And I felt like, I felt like I really felt like I was Superman and could handle anything and everything. Then this was the very first serious relationship I had ever been in. And with the traumatic past and all the stuff I had to endure growing up, and then my early adulthood, I just thought I could handle it, and all the baggage that came with this person. And it was my very first serious relationship. I went out there and got myself in the most complicated situation I could find. And then I stayed because I felt like she needed me.
Wow. I'm so glad that you shared that. I am so glad that you shared that.
I thought I could fix it.
You thought you could fix it. Yeah. And sometimes people think when they have, especially men, when they've been through challenging times already, you almost feel that you're built for this type of scenario. And then needing to actually be a hero to help someone else. And especially if you're dealing with a woman who has had toxic relationships herself, or has not had a good relationship either with her father, or just men in general, even if it's not something within the childhood. And so when men start thinking that they can be the hero in a scenario of that nature, then yes, they find themselves that they've bit off more than they can chew. And then who do you really want to talk about that to? When there's the part of you that feels like, oh, I should have seen this coming, and I didn't, or I thought I could fix this. And so
I did see it coming.
Yeah, a lot of times it's not the blindsided types of scenarios. A lot of times it is eyes wide open. And so sometimes the suffering is being brought on by oneself. But that doesn't mean too that, well, let me shift gears here, because there are times where that is not the case at all, where men have just found themselves in some situations, but a lot of times it is because they've actually engaged themselves with a woman who is someone who, I don't say needs a man in terms of what the traditional stuff is today, because there are a lot of independent women, but men do like to be in places where they feel needed. So if there is an opportunity for some type of need to be met, or to be a hero or whatever, then they do get in those relationships and sometimes, stay in those. But yeah, this right here, this topic, this subject, as you know, it's deep. It's so multi-layered, but
Yeah.
it's not one that's talked about, not on the male side, not as much. And it's the time where there does need to be a little bit more illumination around these particular topics, because we're in a time where it's freedom time for everyone. We all need to be liberated to higher levels in our own individuality. But as that's taking place, because relationship dynamics are the ones that people have to deal with the most. It's different when you're just dealing with yourself. But when there's now other people involved, you can't get away from those types of dynamics without being impacted some type of way. So before we get ready to close out, do you have any empowerment at this time that you would like to offer in terms of with men who are struggling, feel smothered, or they are really suffocating? I mean, feel like there's just a life going out of them at this point based on relationship dynamics, even if it's not with a spouse or a significant other. I mean, it can be family stuff. Is there anything that you would want to impart, whether from your own journey or just anything you would like to share around that?
Well, first I would tell them to go find somebody, anybody that they trust enough where they feel like they can talk to about it, and go to them, see if they can offer some kind of guidance or some advice. And then if it's stressing you out too much, then the convenience is not worth the hassle, and it's not worth the stress.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And something's coming to mind now. I'm like, this would come up, of course, as we're going to be starting to close out, but I feel like I have to talk about it a little bit. So, and this is still focusing on the male dynamics. Sometimes when men are in relationships with a certain breed, of woman, it can be interesting because sometimes men won't leave those situations too, because women will try to stronghold them in bringing up different dynamics. You and I remember we've had some conversations around this particular topic where women will say, well, nobody else is going to accept you like I will. That's really manipulative.
That, or they'll say you'll never find another woman like me.
Right.
Well, hell, ain't that the point?
Exactly.
That's the whole point.
Yes.
You don't want somebody else like you.
Exactly. And this works both ways, of course, but we're talking about the things that men go through behind the scenes that aren't talked about a lot. I got so tickled there because it's like you were speaking my mind, in terms of that being stated. Again, well, that's the point. But that's the thing, when people don't see anything wrong with them, and honestly, it's worse when a woman can't see her own, whoa, that you think it's bad when men get delusional within their own dynamics.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that particular aspect of it. But I was just going to say, if that's why it's important after you leave that relationship, do the work on yourself.
Yes.
So you won't attract that same type of relationship after you get out of that one.
Absolutely.
Because if you get into another relationship that's like that one, it's defeating the whole purpose and undoing all the work you did. It's like taking a shower and putting dirty clothes back on.
Exactly. Right. That's a great way to, oh, that was perfect. That was a great way to state that. That is so true. And that's the thing is, I'm so glad you brought that up, because people think if I get out of the relationship, then they think that the person is the problem within the relationship, right? And often that's not the case. Even though it's problematic, we have to look at, why did you attract that type of person? And if you don't do the work, then you certainly will be back in another scenario like that. Tom, you put it perfect. That was great. Yeah, so they say it takes two for a relationship to break down. And
that's not
well,
always the case.
that's not, no, it's not always the case. What it is that the break, if let's just say that that is true to a certain extent, the breakdown is not necessarily that someone that both parties are having issues, or both parties are causing the problem. What it is that one party has not honored themselves and is settling, and has not come to a point where they've made some significant shifts within themselves to not be in that dynamics. So yes, the biggest detriment is when someone allows themselves to be somewhere where they really don't need to be. And I even did a talk on this not too long ago, and it's been part of my work, where I tell people that, you need to level up before you date up, and going back to the male dynamics, with this is that even though men can be struggling and suffering and going through some things, and we're talking about good men, really good men, but in order to date women of your caliber, you have to make sure that you've done the work within yourself to not align yourself with dating under your character, your values, right? Because, and that goes back to what Tom was saying earlier, that sometimes when you try to be a fix-it, Mr. Fix-It, or you try to be, from your ego, want to be a certain way, want to be the one who's the knight in shining armor for the woman who's never had a man to be a certain way, and you think, I'm going to show her something different. Hurt people. And when they have not come to a place themselves, again, you can't fix them. So when you do get in a relationship with them, even though you could not be doing anything, quote unquote, wrong, but you're wronging yourself by being somewhere you really have no business being. So like Tom said, you got to do the work. And the work is not just to get out of the relationship. The work is to come into the truth of who you are and align higher, all right? So you align higher, you're not even going to be a match to that toxicity, right? So we could talk about so many other topics, around this. But this has been great. I think that we have definitely unmasked some scenarios that aren't commonly talked about. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I would say so. And yeah, we definitely need to pick this back up.
So, okay. Well, I would definitely make sure that I have you back, not only for this, but we'll spin off to do our own other relationship empowerment segment, when this series wraps up. So yeah, I think this is a good place to conclude. What do you think? Or do you have anything else you want to pop in real quick before we wrap up here?
No, I think we're good here. We gave them a whole lot already. We don't want to, overpower them.
That's true. And I do actually try to keep these segments not very long.
Yeah,
But
we don't want to overload them.
no, because yeah, we want them to go back and listen to the series because it's covering a variety of different topics and everything. But this one definitely was one that needed to be addressed. So, all right, Tom, thank you so much for being here with me today, unmasking some relationship dynamics and helping to bring some empowerment and also some resolution for others, because sometimes it's not even about giving the advice or things. Sometimes people just need to know that they are understood and that there's some sense of support for them. One of the things that I do within these segments is empower individuals to really bring out their own information. You know, I'm big on that. Is that gurus can offer a lot of advice and tell you what you need to do in relationships, but you ultimately have to know yourself and be able to navigate your inner landscape and bring that wisdom out, because people know. And you really have to listen to yourself. You have to be instinctual, be intuitive, like Tom was saying, and I was mentioning before. A lot of times people do know. We're not as blindsided to things in relationships like we may pretend to be or want to believe that we are. You look back and you'll see there were signs. In some cases, yes, people are blindsided, but a lot of times there are things. But when you get that gut feeling about something, you need to listen to it, right, Tom? That you need to listen to it.
Yeah, or it's gonna cost you.
Oh, majorly, right. Yeah, it's gonna cost you if you don't allow yourself to know that you're on the right track and to listen to your gut and your intuition. Yeah, you're gonna find yourself in a really bad situation that could have been avoided. And so that's the thing about, go ahead.
That's time you can't get back.
You're right. That you can't redeem that time. Right. Yeah. Now you are dealing with the loss of that, but you can, I don't even say make up, but you can start anew and not do the things from before. So anyway, that's part of the empowerment, is empower yourself to listen to yourself when you know something isn't right, and don't try to see something there that's not there, right? So we will continue this in other conversations. So thank you again, Tom, for being here with me. And to those who are listening to the series, make sure that you go to the playlist where you can hear other segments here. And there'll also be some information within the description about myself and Tom and the works, that we do in this area. All right, so that's our empowerment for you today in relationship dynamics, just unmasking the different dynamics around a lot of the uncommon talked about subjects as it relates to relationships. And so we look forward to being back with you soon. Have a great day.